The morning sun cast long shadows across the Navy SEAL training compound in Coronado, California. Sarah Martinez adjusted her gear one final time before stepping through the gates that would change her life forever. At 26, she had already proven herself as an exceptional soldier in the Army Rangers, but this was different. This was the most elite fighting force in the world, and she was about to become the first woman to attempt their advanced operator training. Sarah's boots hit the concrete with purpose as she walked toward the main building. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her olive-green eyes held a determination that had carried her through every challenge life had thrown at her. Growing up in East Los Angeles, she had learned early that respect was earned, not given, and weakness was a luxury she couldn't afford. The whispers started before she even reached the entrance. "Look at this," came a voice from behind her. They really went and did it. "First day and already making history," another voice added, dripping with sarcasm. Sarah didn't turn around. She had expected this. In her 8 years of military service, she had faced doubt, skepticism, and outright hostility. But she had also learned that action spoke louder than words, and results silenced critics faster than arguments ever could. Inside the briefing room, 50 of the most skilled operators in the Navy sat in neat rows. These were men who had survived Hell Week, passed the most rigorous selection process in the military, and proven themselves in combat zones around the world. They were the best of the best, and they knew it. Sarah took her assigned seat in the third row, feeling the weight of 50 pairs of eyes on her. Some looked curious, others skeptical, but most just looked through her as if she wasn't there at all. She understood their perspective. For decades, this had been their world, their brotherhood, their sacred ground. Her presence changed everything, whether she succeeded or failed. Commander Jack Reynolds entered the room with the bearing of a man who had seen more combat than most soldiers would in 3 lifetimes. His weathered face bore scars from operations that would never make it into official reports, and his steel-gray eyes missed nothing. At 45, he had been leading SEAL teams for over 2 decades and had earned the respect of every man in the room. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. "Welcome to Advanced Operator Training. For the next 12 weeks, you will be pushed beyond your limits. You will be tested in ways that will break some of you. This is not Hell Week. Those who don't will return to their previous units with the knowledge that they gave their best effort." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Tier 1 operations meant the most classified, most dangerous missions in the world. It meant being part of the teams that world leaders called when conventional forces weren't enough. It meant proving that she belonged among the absolute elite. "Before we begin," Reynolds continued, "I want to address the elephant in the room." His eyes found Sarah again, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. "We have a female operator in this class. Some of you may have opinions about that. Keep them to yourself. She earned her spot here the same way you did, through exceptional performance and recommendation. She'll be held to the exact same standards as everyone else. No more, no less." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah felt a mixture of gratitude and resentment. She appreciated the commander's fairness, but she also knew that his words had just painted a bigger target on her back. Now everyone would be watching, waiting for her to fail, eager to prove that this experiment was a mistake. "First exercise begins at 0500 tomorrow," Reynolds announced. "Combat simulation in the kill house. You'll be working in teams of 5. Team assignments are posted outside." Dismissed. As the men filed out of the room, Sarah remained in her seat for a moment, collecting herself. She had been through intense training before, but nothing quite like this. The stakes had never been higher, and the scrutiny had never been more intense. "Martinez." She looked up to find Commander Reynolds standing beside her seat. "Yes, sir. Walk with me." They stepped outside into the California sunshine, away from the ears and eyes of the other operators. Reynolds' expression was unreadable as he led her toward the training facilities. "I'm going to be straight with you," he said without preamble. "Half the men in that room think you don't belong here. The other half are waiting for you to prove them right. You're going to face challenges that have nothing to do with your actual abilities and everything to do with their preconceptions." Sarah nodded. "I understand, sir. I've dealt with this before." "Not like this, you haven't." Reynolds stopped walking and faced her directly. "This isn't just about proving you can do the job. This is about changing the culture of the most traditional, most exclusive military unit in existence. That's a heavy burden for anyone to carry. With respect, sir, I didn't ask for that burden. I just want to be the best operator I can be. Reynolds studied her face for a long moment. Your file says you scored perfect marks in every phase of Ranger training. Top of your class in advanced marksmanship. Commendations for valor in 3 separate combat deployments. Why leave the Army? Why come here? The question touched something deep in Sarah's core. She thought about her childhood, watching her father struggle to provide for their family despite working 2 jobs. She thought about her younger brother Miguel, who had looked up to her even when she was just another kid from the neighborhood with big dreams and no clear path to achieve them. Because this is where the real difference gets made, she said finally. Rangers are elite soldiers, but SEALs are operators who change the course of history. When I was deployed in Afghanistan, I watched SEAL teams accomplish in one night what conventional forces couldn't do in months. I want to be part of that. And you're willing to endure whatever it takes to get there? Yes, sir. Reynolds nodded slowly. Then, let me give you some advice. Don't try to prove you're as good as the men. Prove you're better, because that's the only way you're going to earn their respect. As they walked back toward the compound, Sarah felt the weight of what lay ahead. Tomorrow would begin the most challenging period of her life, and she would face it knowing that failure wasn't just personal. It would be seen as proof that women didn't belong in the special operations community. That evening, she found herself in the base cafeteria, eating alone while conversations buzzed around her. She caught fragments of discussions about upcoming exercises, past deployments, and speculation about the new training program. Occasionally, she heard her name mentioned, usually followed by laughter or disparaging comments. "I give her a week," she heard someone say from a nearby table. "You're being generous," came the reply. 3 days, tops. First time she has to carry a wounded teammate, she'll fold. Sarah focused on her meal, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. She had learned long ago that engaging with doubt only fed it. Better to let her performance speak for itself. As she prepared to leave, a shadow fell across her table. She looked up to see a tall, broad-shouldered operator with piercing blue eyes and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. This was Marcus Chun, she realized, one of the most decorated SEALs in the unit, a man whose reputation preceded him wherever he went. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, though he was already pulling out a chair. Sarah gestured for him to proceed, curious about what he wanted. "I've been watching you," Marcus said, settling into his seat. "Seeing how you handle yourself. Impressive so far." "Thank you," Sarah replied cautiously. "Don't thank me yet. I haven't decided if that's a compliment." His smile was cold, calculating. "See, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen a lot of operators come through these programs. Most of them are forgettable. But you're different. Because I'm a woman? Because you're a political statement." Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conversational tone that somehow felt more threatening than shouting would have. "The brass wants to prove they're progressive, so they're putting you through a program you can't possibly complete. When you fail, and you will fail, they'll say they gave women a fair chance. It's all theater." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "What if I don't fail? Then you'll have achieved something impossible, which makes you either superhuman or a liar. Neither possibility sits well with me. Why are you telling me this?" Marcus stood up, his considerable frame casting a shadow over the table. "Because I want you to understand what you're really up against. This isn't just about physical challenges or mental toughness. This is about belonging to something that has taken generations to build. When you fail, you'll take a piece of that legacy with you." After he left, Sarah sat alone in the emptying cafeteria, processing the encounter. She realized that Marcus Chun represented something more dangerous than open hostility. He represented the voice of institutional resistance, the kind of deeply ingrained opposition that couldn't be overcome with a single perfect performance or even a string of them. That night, as she lay in her bunk in the temporary quarters assigned to her, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the little girl who had dreamed of being a soldier while watching war movies with her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who had taught her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. She thought about the first time she had held a rifle, the first time she had jumped out of an airplane, the first time she had been shot at in combat. Each experience had built upon the last, creating a foundation of confidence and competence that had carried her to this moment. But this was different. This wasn't just about her own dreams anymore. Like it or not, She had become a symbol, a representation of possibility for every young woman who had ever wondered if she could serve in combat, if she could push herself to the absolute limits of human endurance, if she could earn a place among warriors. The responsibility was overwhelming, but it was also liberating. If she succeeded, she would open doors that had been closed for generations. If she failed, she might be closing them for generations to come. Either way, she would know that she had given everything she had to the attempt. As sleep finally claimed her, Sarah's last thought was of the morning to come. In a few hours, the real test would begin. Tomorrow, she would start proving that she belonged here, one challenge at a time, one exercise at a time, one day at a time. The kill house awaited, and with it, the first real chance to show these men that their assumptions about her were wrong. She had trained for this moment her entire adult life, and she was ready to prove that strength came in many forms, that courage knew no gender, and that the heart of a warrior beat just as fiercely in her chest as it did in theirs. Tomorrow would be the beginning of everything. The alarm pierced through the pre-dawn darkness at 0430 hours. Sarah was already awake, had been for the past 20 minutes, lying in her bunk and running through mental rehearsals of room clearing procedures. Around her, the other operators moved with the efficiency of men accustomed to functioning on minimal sleep and maximum adrenaline. She dressed quickly in full combat gear, tactical vest, helmet, night vision goggles, and the modified M4 rifle that had become an extension of her body during her years as a ranger. Every piece of equipment was checked and rechecked, every strap secured, every magazine counted. In the kill house, there was no room for equipment failures or oversights. The kill house itself was a marvel of military engineering, a three-story structure that could be reconfigured into dozens of different layouts, populated with computerized targets that could distinguish between friend and foe, and equipped with sensors that tracked every movement, every shot fired, every second of hesitation. It was where legends were made and careers were ended. Outside the facility, Commander Reynolds waited with the tactical instructors, men whose job it was to push elite operators beyond their perceived limitations. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of ocean salt and the subtle smell of gun oil that seemed to permeate every surface on a military base. Today's exercise is straightforward, Reynolds announced to the assembled operators. Hostage rescue scenario. High-value target is being held on the second floor of the structure. Multiple hostiles throughout the building. Your team has 15 minutes to plan, then you execute. You'll be judged on speed, accuracy, teamwork, and tactical decision-making. Sarah found herself assigned to Team Bravo, along with 4 other operators she had never worked with before. The team leader was Mike Sullivan, a veteran of 6 deployments who carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had been tested in real combat. The others were Jimmy Rodriguez, a demolitions expert from Texas, Tony Kim, a sniper whose reputation for precision was legendary, and Derek Walsh, a communications specialist who could coordinate complex operations while under fire. As they huddled together for mission planning, Sarah noticed the subtle ways the team dynamics played out. Sullivan addressed most of his comments to the other men, occasionally glancing at her, as if remembering she was there. Rodriguez made jokes that weren't quite offensive, but weren't entirely respectful either. Kim remained professionally neutral, while Walsh seemed genuinely curious about her capabilities. Okay, here's what we know, Sullivan began, spreading a blueprint of the kill house on the ground between them. Single HVT, second floor, probably the corner room based on the scenario parameters. Multiple hostiles, unknown exact number, but probably 8 to 12 based on the building size. Sarah studied the blueprint, her mind automatically calculating fields of fire, potential ambush points, and the most efficient routes through the structure. She had done this hundreds of times before, but never with stakes this high. Standard stack and clear, Rodriguez suggested. Fast and violent, overwhelm them before they can react. That's one option, Sullivan agreed. Kim, what's your read on Overwatch positions? As the discussion continued, Sarah noticed that no one had asked for her input. She debated whether to speak up or wait to be asked, weighing the risk of appearing pushy against the risk of not contributing to the team's success. What about a diversionary breach on the first floor? She finally suggested. Small explosive charge on the front entrance to draw attention, while the main assault team comes through the skylight onto the third floor and works down. The suggestion was met with silence. Sullivan looked at the blueprint again, tracing potential routes with his finger. That's actually not bad, Kim said slowly. Creates confusion, splits their attention. Could work, Walsh agreed, but it requires perfect timing. Sullivan studied Sarah's face for a moment, as if seeing her for the first time. You've done building assaults before. 17 combat operations in Afghanistan, Sarah replied simply. Urban warfare was my specialty. For the next 10 minutes, the team refined the plan. Sarah found herself contributing more frequently as the men began to recognize that her suggestions were based on solid tactical knowledge and real-world experience. By the time they were called to execute, they had developed a sophisticated multi-pronged assault that played to each operator's strengths. The kill house loomed before them, its windows dark and forbidding. Sarah could feel her heart rate settling into the controlled rhythm she had learned to cultivate before combat operations. Fear was natural, but panic was deadly. The key was channeling the adrenaline into heightened awareness and faster reflexes. Team Bravo, you have a green light, came the voice over their radio systems. Clock starts now. Rodriguez moved to the front entrance with his explosive charge, a small-shaped device designed to blow the door open with maximum noise and minimum actual damage. Kim took position across the street with his sniper rifle, providing overwatch and eliminating any targets that presented themselves through the windows. Walsh established communications in a van parked nearby, ready to coordinate with outside support if needed. Sarah followed Sullivan up the fire escape toward the rooftop access point, moving with the fluid grace that came from years of practice. They had rehearsed this approach during their planning session, but executing it under pressure was entirely different. Every creak of the metal stairs seemed amplified. Every shadow could hide an enemy observer. The rooftop was clear, just as their intelligence had suggested. Sullivan hand-signaled for Sarah to take position by the skylight while he prepared the rappelling gear. Through the reinforced glass, she could see the third-floor hallway below, empty for the moment, but that could change in seconds. Diversion in 10 seconds, came Rodriguez's voice over the radio. Sarah felt time slow down, the way it always did in the moments before action. She could hear her own breathing, controlled and steady. She could feel the weight of her rifle, familiar and reassuring. She could sense Sullivan's presence beside her, tense with anticipation. The explosion from the front of the building was muffled, but unmistakable. Immediately, Sarah heard shouts and running footsteps from inside the structure. The diversion was working. The defenders were repositioning to counter what they believed was the main assault. Go, 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 Sullivan whispered. Sarah rappelled through the skylight with practiced efficiency, landing silently in the third-floor hallway. The space was dimly lit, with multiple doorways leading off the main corridor. She moved to secure the left side, while Sullivan took the right, their movements coordinated through months of training, even though they had never worked together before. The first hostile appeared from a doorway, 15 feet ahead. Sarah's rifle came up automatically, muscle memory taking over. The computerized target registered her double tap to the chest before it could bring its own weapon to bear. Clean kill, no hesitation. Sullivan eliminated 2 more targets in quick succession as they advanced down the hallway. Their movement was methodical but fast, each doorway cleared with precision before moving to the next. This was where training met reality, where hundreds of hours of practice paid off in split-second decisions that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Second floor clear, came Kim's voice over the radio. I can see movement in the northwest corner room, second level. That's your HVT location. The stairwell leading to the second floor was a natural choke point, the kind of place where ambushes were most likely. Sarah took point, her rifle tracking potential threat angles as she descended. She could hear Sullivan behind her, providing cover and watching their six. The second floor presented a new challenge. The hallway was longer with more rooms, and the defenders had had time to set up defensive positions. Sarah could see muzzle flashes from the far end of the corridor, at least 3 hostiles in prepared positions. This was where the real test began. The targets on this level were programmed to fight back, to use cover effectively, to coordinate their defensive fire. This wasn't just about marksmanship anymore. It was about tactical thinking under pressure. Frag out, Sullivan called, tossing a training grenade down the hallway. The simulated explosion filled the corridor with smoke and disorienting noise. Sarah used the cover to advance, moving in quick bounds from doorway to doorway. She eliminated the first offender with a controlled burst, then shifted position before return fire could find her. The second hostile was better positioned, using a door frame for cover while maintaining a good field of fire down the hallway. Sarah realized that a frontal assault would be costly and time-consuming. Instead, she signaled to Sullivan and pointed to an adjacent room. Understanding immediately, Sullivan provided suppressive fire while Sarah entered the side room and moved to the window. From there, she could see into the room where the hostile was positioned. A quick shot through the interior wall eliminated the threat without exposing herself to return fire. Nice work. Sullivan's voice carried a note of genuine appreciation. The final approach to the HVD room required careful coordination. The door was partially open, and Sarah could see movement inside, the hostage bound and gagged in a chair, with at least 2 guards maintaining watch. This was the most delicate part of the operation. A mistake here could result in the hostage's death, which would mean mission failure regardless of how well they had performed up to this point. Sarah positioned herself for a clear shot on the guard closest to the hostage, while Sullivan prepared to eliminate the second threat. They would have to fire simultaneously, giving neither guard the opportunity to harm the hostage in response. "On my mark," Sullivan whispered. 3, 2, 1, execute. Both shots fired at the same instant, dropping both guards before they could react. The hostage was secured, the building was clear, and the mission clock showed 11 minutes and 37 seconds, well under the 15-minute time limit. As they emerged from the kill house, Sarah felt the satisfaction that came with a job well done. More importantly, she saw something different in her teammates' eyes. The skepticism hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had been replaced with something that looked like cautious respect. "Not bad for a first run," Sullivan said as they gathered their gear. It was understated praise, but coming from a veteran operator, it meant everything. Commander Reynolds approached the team during their after-action debrief. His expression was neutral, giving nothing away about their performance. "Time was solid," he said simply. "Tactical decisions were sound. No friendly fire incidents, no civilian casualties. Overall, a clean operation." He paused, his eyes finding Sarah. Martinez, that flanking move on the second floor, showed good tactical thinking. Most operators would have tried to force their way through. It was a small acknowledgement, but in the hyper-competitive world of special operations, any praise from command was significant. Sarah nodded her thanks, maintaining the professional demeanor that had served her well throughout her military career. The rest of the morning was spent in classroom instruction, covering advanced close-quarters combat techniques and psychological operations. Sarah found herself taking notes furiously, absorbing every detail of information that could make her a more effective operator. The material was complex and demanding, requiring not just physical skills, but intellectual understanding of tactics, psychology, and strategic thinking. During lunch break, she noticed a change in how the other operators interacted with her. The conversations were still guarded, but they included her more naturally. Sullivan asked her opinion on a tactical scenario they were discussing. Rodriguez offered to share intelligence about upcoming training exercises. It was a small shift, but it felt significant. The afternoon brought physical training that pushed everyone to their limits. 2 hours of continuous exercise, running, swimming, obstacle courses, and strength training that would have broken civilian athletes. Sarah kept pace with the men, refusing to show any sign of the exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm her. Marcus Chun was in her PT group, and she noticed him watching her performance with increasing intensity. During the rope climb exercise, he positioned himself next to her, matching her pace step for step. "Trying to prove something?" he asked as they reached the top of the 30-foot rope simultaneously. "Just doing the job," Sarah replied, controlling her breathing despite the burning in her muscles. "The job is more than one good day in the kill house." "I know." They rappelled down in silence, but Sarah could feel the challenge in his words. Chun wasn't just questioning her abilities. He was declaring that he would be watching, waiting for her to fail, ready to use any mistake as evidence that she didn't belong. That evening, as she cleaned her equipment and prepared for the next day's training, Sarah reflected on what she had accomplished and what still lay ahead. One successful exercise didn't make her a SEAL, and she knew that each day would bring new tests, new obstacles, new opportunities to prove herself or fall short. The kill house had been just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and the day after that would bring others still. For the next 11 weeks, she would face the most demanding training in the military, knowing that every performance was being scrutinized, every mistake magnified, every success measured against impossible standards. But tonight, for the first time since arriving at the compound, Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She had proven that she could perform under pressure, that she could contribute to a team's success, and that her presence could make the unit stronger rather than weaker. It was a small victory, but in a world where progress was measured in millimeters rather than miles, small victories were precious. She had earned the right to continue, the chance to prove that yesterday's success wasn't a fluke, and the opportunity to show that she belonged among the elite warriors who protected the nation's most vital interests. Tomorrow would bring new tests, but tonight, she was still here, still fighting, still proving that determination and skill mattered more than prejudice and tradition. The real battle was just beginning, but the first skirmish had been won. 3 weeks into the advanced operator training, Sarah's body had adapted to the relentless pace, but her mind carried the weight of constant scrutiny. Every morning brought new challenges designed to test not just physical capabilities, but mental resilience under extreme stress. The training had evolved from basic tactical exercises to complex scenarios that mimicked real-world operations where failure meant death. The obstacle course that morning was different from anything they had faced before. Set up in the California desert, it combined elements of urban warfare, wilderness survival, and combat medical training. The operators would move through 12 stations over 8 miles, carrying full combat loads while being evaluated on everything from marksmanship under stress to treating traumatic injuries in field conditions. Sarah adjusted her pack one final time, feeling the familiar weight of 60 pounds of gear across her shoulders. Beside her, the other operators made their final preparations with the focused intensity of men who understood that this exercise would separate the capable from the exceptional. Marcus Chun stood 3 positions down from her at the starting line, his expression unreadable behind tactical sunglasses. Over the past weeks, he had maintained a professional distance while making it clear through subtle comments and pointed looks that he remained unconvinced of her place in the program. Today's exercise would be conducted in teams of 2, and Sarah had been paired with him. The irony wasn't lost on her. The most skeptical operator in the program would be her partner for one of the most demanding challenges they had faced. It was either coincidence or careful orchestration by the training staff, who seemed to delight in creating situations that pushed operators beyond their comfort zones. "Listen up," Commander Reynolds announced, his voice carrying across the desert morning. This exercise simulates a long-range reconnaissance mission with multiple objectives. You'll move as 2-person teams through hostile territory, gathering intelligence, eliminating specific targets, and extracting a wounded teammate. The terrain will challenge you, the targets will fight back, and the medical scenario will test everything you've learned about combat medicine. He gestured toward the course, which stretched across rolling hills dotted with man-made obstacles and defensive positions. Total time limit is 6 hours. Teams that don't complete all objectives within that time frame fail the exercise. Teams that complete the objectives but exceed acceptable casualty rates also fail. This isn't just about individual performance. It's about working as a unit to accomplish the mission. Sarah felt her pulse quicken with anticipation. This was the kind of challenge she had trained for her entire adult life, the type of operation that separated warriors from soldiers. Success would require not just physical endurance, but tactical intelligence, technical skill, and seamless teamwork. "Chun Martinez," Reynolds called out. "You're Team 7. Your infiltration route is Northwest Corridor. Extract point is Hill 247. Questions?" "No, sir," both operators replied simultaneously. As the other teams moved out to their starting positions, Sarah found herself alone with Marcus for the first time since training began. The silence stretched between them as they conducted final equipment checks and reviewed the mission parameters. "Look," Marcus said finally, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I don't know what kind of political games are being played here, but on this exercise, you're my partner. I expect you to keep up, follow orders, and not get us both killed trying to prove a point." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I expect the same from you." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, at her directness. Fair enough. The first 3 miles of the course took them through rough terrain that required careful navigation and constant awareness of potential ambush sites. They moved in tactical formation, with Marcus taking point while Sarah provided rear security. Their communication was minimal but efficient, using hand signals and whispered updates to coordinate their movement. Despite his skepticism about her place in the program, Marcus was undeniably a skilled operator. His movement through the terrain was fluid and purposeful, his awareness of their surroundings constant and comprehensive. Sarah found herself adapting to his rhythm, matching his pace while maintaining her own sector of responsibility. The first tactical challenge appeared at the 3-mile mark, a simulated enemy observation post that needed to be eliminated without alerting other defenders in the area. The position was well placed on high ground with good fields of fire, manned by instructors with paintball weapons who had been ordered to make the exercise as realistic as possible. Marcus signaled for a halt and gestured toward the position. 2 defenders, approximately 200 meters away, with limited cover approaches. A frontal assault would be suicide, but flanking maneuvers would take time they couldn't afford. Sarah studied the terrain, noting a dry creek bed that curved around the hill's eastern side. It would provide concealment for most of the approach, but the final assault would still require crossing open ground. She pointed out the route to Marcus, who nodded after considering the options. "You take the creek bed," he whispered. "Give me 10 minutes to get into position on the west side. When I open fire, you assault from the east." It was a sound plan that played to both their strengths. Sarah began her movement through the creek bed, using the natural terrain to mask her approach. The rough ground was hard on her knees and elbows, but she had endured worse during ranger training. Every few yards, she paused to listen, ensuring that her movement hadn't been detected. The 10 minutes felt like an hour, but when Marcus's rifle cracked in the distance, Sarah was in position and ready to move. She exploded from cover, sprinting across 30 yards of open ground while the defender's attention was focused on Marcus's position. Her first shot took down the nearest defender before he could swing his weapon around to face the new threat. The second defender managed to get off 2 shots, both missing as Sarah dove behind a large boulder before her return fire eliminated him as well. "Clear," she called out, and Marcus emerged from his concealment. "Nice work," he said, and this time there was no grudging tone in his voice. "Clean and fast." The next phase of the exercise tested their endurance and navigation skills as they moved through increasingly difficult terrain toward their primary objective. The temperature was rising, and the desert sun was beginning to take its toll on both operators. Sarah could feel sweat pooling under her tactical vest, but she maintained her pace and focus. At the 5-mile mark, they encountered the main tactical challenge, a fortified compound that housed their primary target. Intelligence briefings had indicated at least 6 defenders with crew-served weapons and prepared defensive positions. This wasn't just about marksmanship. It required careful planning and coordinated execution. From their observation position 300 meters away, Sarah and Marcus studied the compound through binoculars. The defensive layout was sophisticated, with overlapping fields of fire and multiple fallback positions. A hasty assault would be costly and likely unsuccessful. "What do you think?" Marcus asked, handing her the binoculars. Sarah took her time studying the target, noting weapon positions, likely enemy strength, and potential weaknesses in the defense. "Main gate is a kill zone, but there's dead space on the north wall where the terrain drops off. If we can get close enough, we might be able to breach there. Risky. If they have someone watching that approach, we're trapped against the wall with no cover." "True, but look at the timing of their patrols. There's a gap every 12 minutes when both roving guards are on the far side of the compound. If we time it right, we can get to the wall undetected." Marcus studied the compound again, tracking the movement patterns she had identified. "That's actually brilliant. But the timing has to be perfect." They spent the next 15 minutes finalizing their plan. Sarah would create a diversion on the south side of the compound, drawing attention and hopefully forcing the defenders to reposition. Marcus would use that distraction to reach the north wall and breach it with explosives. Once inside, they would fight their way to the primary target. The plan required trust. Sarah had to rely on Marcus to execute his part perfectly, while he had to trust that her diversion would be effective without compromising her own safety. It was the kind of mutual dependence that formed the backbone of special operations, and Sarah realized that this exercise had transformed their partnership from grudging cooperation to something approaching genuine teamwork. Sarah's diversion went perfectly. Using smoke grenades and carefully aimed shots, she created the impression of a much larger attacking force approaching from the south. The defenders reacted exactly as predicted, shifting their positions to counter the perceived threat. Marcus's breach was swift and violent. The explosive charge blew a hole in the compound wall, just as Sarah's diversion reached its peak. He was inside and fighting his way toward the target before the defenders realized they were facing a two-pronged attack. Sarah maintained her covering fire until she heard Marcus's signal, then bounded toward the breach point. The compound's interior was chaos, smoke, shouting, and the crack of simulated gunfire as Marcus engaged multiple targets simultaneously. She entered through the breach to find Marcus pinned down by two defenders in an elevated position. Without hesitation, she flanked their position and eliminated both threats, clearing the way for him to advance toward the primary objective. The target, a high-value individual represented by a training mannequin, was secured in the compound's central building. Marcus reached it first, but as he moved to complete the objective, simulated enemy fire from an unexpected position struck him in the shoulder, marking him as wounded. "I'm hit," he called out, slumping against a wall while maintaining his grip on his weapon. This was the medical portion of the exercise, and Sarah's response would be evaluated as carefully as their tactical performance. She immediately moved to his position, using her body to shield him while assessing his simulated injuries. "How bad?" she asked, running through the trauma assessment procedures that had been drilled into every operator. "Shoulder wound, possible arterial bleeding," Marcus replied, playing his role in the scenario. Sarah went to work with the medical kit every operator carried. In a real situation, Marcus would be bleeding out while under enemy fire. Her job was to stabilize him enough for evacuation while maintaining security and completing the mission. Working with practiced efficiency, she applied a pressure bandage and administered simulated pain medication. The whole process took less than 3 minutes, but it required her to balance medical priorities with tactical awareness, treating her patient while remaining ready to fight if necessary. "Can you move?" she asked. With help, Sarah helped Marcus to his feet, supporting his weight while maintaining her weapon in a ready position. They still needed to reach the extraction point, and carrying a wounded teammate through hostile territory would test every aspect of their training. The final 2 miles were the longest of Sarah's military career. Supporting Marcus's weight while maintaining tactical awareness and navigating rough terrain pushed her physical capabilities to their limits. Her shoulders burned from the extra weight, her legs trembled with exhaustion, and her lungs struggled to process the thin desert air. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. This was exactly the kind of scenario that critics claimed women couldn't handle, carrying a wounded male teammate to safety under combat conditions. Every step was a statement. Every yard covered was proof that strength came in many forms. Marcus, despite playing the role of wounded operator, began to understand what he was witnessing. Sarah's determination was absolute, her commitment to the mission unwavering even as her body approached its breaking point. She was carrying him not just physically, but also carrying the weight of expectations, prejudices, and the hopes of every woman who might follow in her footsteps. "You can put me down," Marcus said quietly as they neared the extraction point. "I can walk the last quarter mile." "Negative," Sarah replied through gritted teeth. "Mission parameters specify casualty evacuation. We finished this right." When they finally reached the extraction point, a designated landing zone where a helicopter would theoretically pick up both operators and their intelligence, Sarah's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, still maintaining her grip on Marcus, ensuring that he was safely positioned before allowing herself to acknowledge her exhaustion. The exercise timer showed 5 hours and 43 minutes, well under the time limit, with all objectives completed and no mission-critical errors. It was a flawless performance by any measure, but more importantly, it was a demonstration of what partnership could accomplish when ego took a back seat to mission success. As they waited for the extraction helicopter to arrive for the final phase of the exercise, Marcus looked at Sarah with something approaching awe. He began, then stopped. "What? I've been in this business for 15 years. I've seen operators who are stronger, faster, more experienced. But I've never seen anyone who wanted it more than you do." It wasn't an apology for his earlier skepticism, but it was acknowledgement, recognition, the beginning of respect. The helicopter arrived in a cloud of dust and noise, and as they climbed aboard for the ride back to base, Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She had proven something today, not just to Marcus, but to herself. She belonged here, earned her place through performance rather than politics, and demonstrated that the mission was always more important than personal pride or prejudice. But she also understood that this was just one exercise, one day, one small step forward in a journey that would require hundreds of similar performances. The training was far from over, and each new challenge would test her resolve in different ways. As the helicopter flew back toward the base, Sarah looked out at the desert landscape passing below and thought about how far she had come, not just in terms of distance, but in terms of acceptance. Marcus Chun might not be completely convinced yet, but he was no longer dismissive. That was progress, and in the world of special operations, progress was often measured in the smallest of increments. Week 8 of advanced operator training brought with it the most feared phase of the entire program, Hell Month. This wasn't the original Hell Week that basic SEAL candidates endured, but something far more sophisticated and brutal. It was designed to break the best operators in the world, to find the psychological and physical limits of men who had already proven themselves in combat. For Sarah, Hell Month represented the ultimate test. If she could survive this, no one could question her place among the elite. If she couldn't, her failure would be seen as proof that women simply weren't capable of operating at this level, regardless of their individual qualifications. The month began with sleep deprivation. For 72 straight hours, the remaining operators, now down to 37 from the original 50, were subjected to continuous training exercises with no more than 20 minutes of rest at any given time. It was psychological warfare designed to break down mental defenses and reveal each operator's true character when stripped of pretense and ego. Sarah found herself hallucinating by the second day. The lack of sleep, combined with constant physical stress and tactical problems that required complex decision-making, created a surreal environment where reality blended with exhaustion-induced visions. She saw her father encouraging her during a particularly brutal obstacle course run, heard her mother's voice telling her to come home during a combat simulation that seemed to stretch on forever. But she pushed through, drawing on reserves of mental strength she didn't know she possessed. Around her, other operators were beginning to crack. 2 men dropped out on day 2, unable to continue. A third was removed by medical staff after collapsing during a swimming exercise and nearly drowning in the base pool. Marcus Chun, despite his reputation as one of the toughest operators in the program, was clearly struggling. The man who had questioned Sarah's place here was now leaning on walls between exercises, his usual precision replaced by the mechanical movements of someone operating purely on muscle memory. On the third night, during a navigation exercise that required teams to find multiple checkpoints in complete darkness, Sarah found Marcus sitting against a tree, staring into the distance with unfocused eyes. "Chun," she called softly, "we need to move." He looked at her without recognition for a moment, then shook his head as if trying to clear it. "Right, moving." But we tried to stand, his legs buckled. 3 days of constant stress had finally overwhelmed even his considerable capabilities. Sarah faced a decision that would define the rest of her career. She could leave him behind, complete the exercise on her own, and prove that she was stronger than the man who had doubted her. It would be justified, even expected. In real combat, operators sometimes had to make hard choices about who could be saved and who couldn't. Instead, she knelt beside him and opened her medical kit. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked, his voice slurred with exhaustion. "Taking care of my teammate," Sarah replied, administering a glucose tablet and checking his pulse. His heart rate was dangerously elevated, and his skin was showing signs of severe dehydration despite the water they had been consuming regularly. "I'm fine," he protested weakly. "You're not. You're going into shock, and if we don't get your blood sugar stabilized, you're going to collapse again." For the next 15 minutes, Sarah used every piece of medical training she had ever received to bring Marcus back from the edge of physical breakdown. She forced him to consume electrolytes, monitored his vital signs, and made the tactical decision to use their emergency signaling device to request evacuation. "No," Marcus said when he realized what she was doing. "Don't call for extraction. I can make it. You can't. And more importantly, you don't have to. We're a team, which means your safety is more important than completing this exercise. If we call for extraction, we both fail. Then, we failed together. It was a moment that crystallized everything Sarah had learned about leadership, about brotherhood, about what it truly meant to be part of the special operations community. Individual achievement meant nothing if it came at the cost of a teammate's well-being. The extraction team arrived within 20 minutes, and Marcus was taken to the medical facility for evaluation and treatment. Sarah expected to be dismissed from the program, to face criticism for not completing the exercise, to hear that her decision proved she wasn't tough enough for special operations. Instead, Commander Reynolds was waiting for her when she returned to the base. "Walk with me," he said simply. They moved through the base in silence, past training facilities where other operators were still engaged in Helm Month exercises, past the medical facility where Marcus was recovering, past the memorial wall that honored SEALs who had died in service to their country. "Do you know why we put you through Helm Month?" Reynolds asked eventually. "To test our limits, to see who breaks under pressure." That's what most people think. But the real reason is to see what you do when your teammates are in trouble. When a mission conflicts with taking care of the people around you. When you have to choose between personal success and collective survival. Sarah remained silent, processing his words. In real operations, we face those choices constantly. Do we risk the mission to save one person? Do we leave someone behind to ensure the rest of the team makes it home? Do we sacrifice immediate objectives for long-term survival? These aren't academic questions. They're life and death decisions that define what kind of operator you are. They stopped walking, and Reynolds faced her directly. You chose your teammate over your training record. You prioritized his survival over your own advancement. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Does this mean I'm out of the program? Hell no. It means you understand what this job is really about. The next 4 weeks of Helm Month passed in a blur of increasingly challenging exercises. Sarah found herself taking on informal leadership roles, helping struggling teammates, and consistently putting mission success above personal recognition. Her performance in individual challenges remained exceptional, but it was her ability to elevate the performance of others that caught the attention of the training staff. Marcus returned to training after 3 days of medical observation, but something had changed in his relationship with Sarah. The skepticism was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine admiration. He began seeking her input on tactical problems, deferring to her judgment in situations where her expertise exceeded his own, and publicly supporting her when other operators questioned her decisions. The climax of Helm Month came during a week-long field exercise that combined everything they had learned into a single, continuous mission. The scenario involved a hostage rescue operation in a foreign country, requiring the teams to infiltrate enemy territory, gather intelligence, eliminate specific threats, rescue multiple hostages, and extract without being captured or killed. Sarah found herself assigned as the team leader for the final exercise, commanding a unit that included Marcus and 3 other operators. It was the first time a woman had been given command responsibility in the Advanced Operator Training Program, and everyone understood the significance of the assignment. The mission began with a nighttime parachute insertion into hostile territory, represented by a remote section of the California mountains that had been populated with opposing force personnel and realistic threats. Sarah's team had to move 20 miles through rough terrain, establish a surveillance post, gather intelligence on enemy movements, and then execute a complex assault on a fortified position. From the moment they hit the ground, Sarah operated with a confidence and tactical awareness that impressed even the veteran operators under her command. Her orders were clear and precise, her decision-making sound under pressure, and her ability to adapt to changing circumstances exceptional. During the intelligence-gathering phase, when enemy patrols forced them to change their planned route, Sarah demonstrated the kind of tactical flexibility that separated good operators from great ones. She repositioned the team to maintain surveillance while avoiding detection, adjusted the timeline to account for unexpected obstacles, and modified the assault plan based on real-time intelligence. The assault itself was a masterpiece of coordination and violence. Sarah's team moved with the precision of a machine, each operator knowing exactly what was expected of them and when. They breached the enemy compound, eliminated all threats, secured the hostages, and extracted to the pickup point without a single casualty or mission-critical error. But it was during the extraction that Sarah faced her ultimate test as a leader. One of the hostages, actually an instructor playing a role, suffered a simulated medical emergency just as enemy reinforcements were approaching their position. The team faced a choice: abandon the casualty and escape, or risk everyone's safety to save one person. "Martinez, we need to go," one of her operators called out as enemy fire began to impact around their position. "Reinforcements are 2 minutes out." Sarah looked at the casualty, at her team, and at the approaching enemy forces. Every calculation suggested that staying to treat the injured person would result in the entire team being captured or killed. From a purely tactical standpoint, the right decision was to leave. "Negative," she said firmly. "We don't leave people behind. Kim, Rodriguez, establish a perimeter. Chun, help me stabilize the casualty. We leave together or not at all." For the next 90 seconds, Sarah worked to stabilize the injured instructor while enemy fire intensified around their position. Her medical training, honed through months of practice, allowed her to work efficiently despite the stress of incoming rounds and the knowledge that every second increased their danger. "Done," she announced, lifting the casualty onto her shoulders. Moving to extract. The team's movement to the pickup point was harrowing. Carrying the extra weight while under fire, navigating rough terrain in darkness, and maintaining tactical discipline required everything they had learned throughout the training program. But they made it, arriving at the extraction point just as the helicopter touched down. As they lifted off, Sarah looked down at the training area disappearing below and realized that something fundamental had changed. She was no longer the outsider trying to prove she belonged. She was a leader who had earned the trust and respect of some of the most elite warriors in the world. The after-action review was conducted by Commander Reynolds and senior training staff in front of all remaining operators. It was an opportunity to dissect every decision, every action, every moment of the exercise to extract lessons that could be applied to real-world operations. Team Alpha, Reynolds began, referring to Sarah's unit, executed a textbook hostage rescue operation under extremely challenging conditions. The tactical planning was sound, the execution was flawless, and the leadership was exceptional. He paused, looking directly at Sarah. Team leader Martinez made a decision during the extraction that some might question. When faced with a casualty that threatened to compromise the entire mission, she chose to risk her team's safety rather than abandon a teammate. From a purely tactical standpoint, this could be seen as the wrong choice. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Had she failed after all? However, Reynolds continued, "Real leadership isn't just about making the tactically optimal decision. It's about making the decision that preserves the soul of the unit, that maintains the bond of trust that holds special operations teams together. In real combat, operators need to know that their leaders will never abandon them, regardless of the cost." The room was silent as his words sank in. Martinez demonstrated the kind of leadership that inspires absolute loyalty and enables teams to accomplish impossible missions. Her decision to save the casualty at significant risk to herself and her team exemplifies the values that make our special operations forces the finest in the world. After the formal review, as the operators dispersed to their barracks, Marcus approached Sarah. "I owe you an apology," he said simply. "For what?" "For thinking that your being here was about politics instead of performance. For assuming you couldn't handle the pressure. For believing that strength was just about physical capabilities." Sarah considered his words. "You don't owe me anything. You gave me the chance to prove myself, and you supported me when it mattered." "No," Marcus said firmly. "I fought against you when I should have been fighting alongside you. I made this harder than it needed to be because I was more worried about tradition than I was about the mission." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two warriors who had been forged in the crucible of the world's most demanding training and emerged as teammates. "For what it's worth," Marcus continued, "you're the best operator I've ever served with. Male, female doesn't matter. You're just the best." It was the recognition Sarah had been working toward since the first day of training, but now that she had it, she realized that the approval of others had never been the real goal. The real goal had been proving to herself that she could operate at this level, that she could lead others in the most challenging circumstances, and that she could uphold the values that made the special operations community something worth belonging to. Hell Month was over, but the most important test still lay ahead. In 2 weeks, the operators would face their final examination, a comprehensive assessment that would determine who earned the right to call themselves Tier 1 operators and who would return to their previous units. Sarah had survived the crucible, but the ultimate challenge was yet to come. The final week of advanced operator training arrived with the weight of 12 weeks of preparation behind it. Only 28 operators remained from the original 50, each one having survived challenges that would have broken ordinary soldiers. But the ultimate test was unlike anything they had faced before, a live-fire exercise against a full company of Marine Force reconnaissance operators, conducted in front of an audience of 250 military personnel, defense officials, and international observers. Sarah stood in the briefing room at 0500 hours, studying the faces around her. These men had become her brothers through shared suffering, mutual respect, and the kind of trust that could only be forged under extreme pressure. The skepticism that had greeted her arrival 12 weeks ago had been replaced by acceptance, but today would determine whether that acceptance translated into professional recognition. Commander Reynolds entered the room with an expression more serious than Sarah had ever seen. Behind him walked Admiral Catherine Michaels, the highest-ranking woman in naval special warfare, and General Robert Harrison, whose reputation as one of the architects of modern special operations preceded him wherever he went. "Gentlemen," Reynolds began, then corrected himself with a slight smile. "Operators, today marks the culmination of 12 weeks of the most intensive training in the military. You've been tested in every conceivable way, and you've proven yourselves worthy of consideration for Tier 1 operations." Admiral Michaels stepped forward, her presence commanding immediate attention. "Today's exercise will simulate a high-value target elimination mission in an urban environment. You'll be facing an entire company of Force Recon Marines who have been preparing for this exercise for 6 months. They know you're coming, they know your capabilities, and they've been specifically trained to counter SEAL tactics." The challenge was unprecedented. Normally, final exercises pitted teams against instructors or simulated opponents. But Force Recon Marines were elite operators in their own right, and a full company meant the SEAL candidates would be outnumbered nearly 10 to 1. "The scenario," General Harrison continued, "involves a terrorist cell holding multiple hostages in a mock urban environment. Your mission is to infiltrate the city, locate and eliminate the cell leadership, rescue the hostages, and extract without sustaining unacceptable casualties." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't just a training exercise. It was a demonstration for the assembled observers, many of whom were there specifically to evaluate whether women could successfully integrate into the most elite military units. "Team assignments," Reynolds announced, "are posted outside. Operation begins at 1400 hours. Failure is not an option." As the operators filed out to check team assignments, Sarah found herself paired with Marcus Chun and 4 other operators for Team Charlie. Their mission was the most challenging: infiltrate the urban center, eliminate the primary target, and provide cover for the other team's extractions. The mock urban environment was a marvel of military engineering, a complete city built in the Nevada desert, complete with buildings, vehicles, and civilians played by actors. Somewhere in that maze of streets and structures, the Marine defenders had established a sophisticated defensive network designed to counter exactly the kind of assault the SEAL teams were planning. "All right," Sarah said as her team gathered for final mission planning, "we've trained for this. The Marines are good, but they're thinking like Marines. They'll establish strong defensive positions, prepare for direct assault, and rely on superior numbers to overwhelm us." Marcus nodded. "Which means we don't give them the kind of fight they're prepared for." "Exactly. We need to think like terrorists, not soldiers. Use the environment, create chaos, make them react to us instead of executing their planned defense." The team spent the next hour refining their assault plan. Instead of the direct, overwhelming violence that SEALs were known for, they would use stealth, misdirection, and the kind of unconventional tactics that had made special operations forces so effective in real-world combat. At 1400 hours, 6 SEAL teams infiltrated the urban environment from different directions. Sarah's team approached from the east, using storm drains and underground utility tunnels to move beneath the Marines' observation posts. It was slow, uncomfortable progress, but it allowed them to penetrate deep into the defensive perimeter without being detected. The underground approach brought them to within 2 blocks of their primary target, a 3-story building where intelligence indicated the terrorist leadership was located. But between their position and the objective lay the most heavily defended section of the entire urban environment. "Overwatch positions on every rooftop," Marcus whispered as they observed the area through a storm drain grating. "At least 2 squads in prepared positions. They've got the entire area locked down. Sarah studied the defensive layout, looking for weaknesses or opportunities that the Marines might have overlooked. The defense was professionally executed, but it was also predictable. The Marines had positioned themselves to counter conventional assault tactics, which created opportunities for operators willing to think outside traditional parameters. "There," she said, pointing to a seemingly innocuous food truck parked on the street level. "That truck has been there since we started observation, but look at the placement. It's positioned to provide cover for anyone moving between buildings, but it's also blocking the Marines' line of sight to that alley." Marcus followed her gaze and immediately understood. "If we can reach the truck without being detected, we can use it as a staging point for the assault. Better than that, if we can get inside the truck, we can drive it directly to the target building. They'll think it's just part of the urban environment until we're right on top of them." It was audacious, unconventional, and exactly the kind of thinking that separated special operations from conventional warfare. The team moved through the storm drains until they were directly beneath the food truck, then carefully emerged through a maintenance access point. The truck was unlocked, and within minutes, Sarah's team had positioned themselves inside while she took the driver's seat. To any observer, it would look like a delivery truck making its routine rounds through the urban environment. The drive to the target building was the longest 3 minutes of Sarah's life. At any moment, a suspicious Marine could challenge the truck or recognize it as an infiltration attempt. But the audacity of the approach worked in their favor. Sometimes the best place to hide was in plain sight. She parked the truck directly in front of the target building, just another vehicle in the urban landscape. Through the windshield, she could see Marine defenders in positions that would have been perfect for stopping a conventional assault, but were useless against an enemy that had just driven up to the front door. "Go, go, go," she whispered into her radio. Her team exploded from the truck with devastating efficiency. The Marines on the first floor were caught completely off guard, overwhelmed before they could effectively respond to the unexpected assault. Sarah's team cleared the ground floor in less than 90 seconds, then began fighting their way up toward the terrorist leadership positions. The second floor was where the real battle began. The Marines had prepared defensive positions that channeled attackers into kill zones, and they fought with the skill and determination that made Force Recon one of the elite units in the military. But Sarah's team had the advantage of surprise and the kind of violent momentum that made SEAL assaults so effective. Room by room, they fought their way through the building. Sarah found herself in close-quarters combat that tested every skill she had learned over 12 weeks of training. Her rifle work was precise and deadly, her movement through the building fluid and purposeful, her tactical decision-making sound under extreme pressure. On the third floor, they encountered the heaviest resistance. The Marines had established a strong defensive position in the corner room, using furniture and debris to create a miniature fortress. Direct assault would be costly, but time was running short. Other teams were counting on Charlie Team's success to complete their own missions. "Frag out," Marcus called, tossing a training grenade into the defensive position. In the confusion that followed the simulated explosion, Sarah flanked the position through an adjacent room, coming through an unexpected angle that caught the defenders completely off guard. Her assault was swift and violent, eliminating 3 defenders before they could reorient to the new threat. The primary target, a high-value individual played by a Marine instructor, was secured within minutes. But as they prepared to extract, Sarah heard something over the radio that changed everything. "Team Alpha is pinned down," came the urgent transmission. "Heavy casualties, unable to extract. Request immediate assistance." Team Alpha was trapped 6 blocks away, surrounded by Marine reinforcements, and unable to reach their extraction point. By all tactical considerations, the mission was a success. The primary objectives had been achieved, and Charlie Team could extract safely with their high-value target. But that would mean abandoning fellow operators who were in trouble. Sarah looked at Marcus, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. They had a choice to make, and it was exactly the kind of choice that defined what kind of operators they were. "What's the call?" Marcus asked. "We don't leave people behind," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Ever." She keyed her radio. "All teams, this is Charlie 6. We're moving to assist Alpha Team. Converge on grid 247. "Charlie 6, this is Command," came Commander Reynolds' voice. "Your mission is complete. You are cleared for extraction." "Negative, Command. We have operators in trouble. Charlie Team is moving to assist." What followed was the kind of running gunfight that legends were made of. Sarah's team fought their way through 6 blocks of urban terrain, engaging Marine defenders while moving to reach their trapped teammates. It was exactly the kind of scenario that critics claimed women couldn't handle. Sustained combat operations under extreme pressure, carrying wounded teammates, making split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. They reached Alpha Team's position just as the Marines were preparing to overrun it. Sarah's assault was perfectly timed, hitting the Marine positions from an unexpected angle and creating enough confusion for Alpha Team to break out of their encirclement. But the fight wasn't over. The combined SEAL teams now had to fight their way to the extraction point while carrying wounded personnel and being pursued by superior numbers of determined opponents. It required everything they had learned about teamwork, tactical thinking, and the kind of sustained courage that made Special Operations Forces so effective. Sarah found herself carrying Jake Morrison, an operator who had been wounded during Alpha Team's fight and couldn't move under his own power. Morrison was 6 feet 4 inches and weighed 220 pounds, nearly 50 pounds more than Sarah herself. But she carried him anyway, refusing assistance from her teammates while continuing to engage targets and make tactical decisions. The extraction point was a landing zone 2 miles away, through terrain that the Marines had been preparing to defend for months. Every block was a battleground, every building a potential ambush site. But the combined SEAL teams moved with a precision and determination that overwhelmed the defenders' carefully prepared positions. When they finally reached the extraction point, Sarah collapsed to her knees, still maintaining her grip on Morrison, ensuring that he was safely positioned before allowing herself to acknowledge her exhaustion. Around her, the other operators were in similar condition, pushed beyond their limits, but successful in accomplishing something that should have been impossible. The extraction helicopter landed in a cloud of dust and noise, and as the teams loaded their wounded and prepared for departure, Sarah realized that something had changed. The exercise was over, but more importantly, she had proven something that went beyond individual capability. She had demonstrated leadership under the most challenging circumstances, shown that she could make the hard decisions that combat required, and proved that gender was irrelevant when it came to the qualities that made Special Operations Forces effective. In the debrief that followed, conducted in front of the 250 military personnel who had observed the exercise, Admiral Michaels stood to address the assembled group. "Today," she began, "we witnessed something unprecedented in the history of special operations. A team of SEAL candidates successfully completed one of the most challenging exercises ever designed against a superior force under conditions that would have tested seasoned veterans." She paused, looking directly at Sarah. "But more importantly, we saw demonstrated the values that make our Special Operations Forces the finest in the world. When faced with the choice between mission success and teammate safety, these operators chose their teammates. When confronted with impossible odds, they chose to fight. When given the opportunity to take the easy path, they chose the hard right over the easy wrong." General Harrison stepped forward. "The exercise was designed to evaluate individual capabilities, but what we witnessed was something far more valuable, the kind of unit cohesion and leadership that enables small teams to accomplish strategic objectives." Commander Reynolds called the successful operators to attention. "By order of the Chief of Naval Operations, the following personnel are hereby designated as qualified for Tier 1 Special Operations assignments." Sarah heard her name called along with 23 others. She had done it. She had not just survived the most challenging military training in existence. She had excelled, led others to success, and proven that merit was the only qualification that mattered. But as the ceremony concluded and the observers dispersed, Sarah realized that the real victory wasn't in the recognition or the qualification. It was in the knowledge that she had pushed herself to the absolute limits of human capability and discovered that those limits were far beyond what she had imagined. Marcus approached her as they gathered their gear for the final time as training candidates. "So what's next?" he asked. Sarah looked around at the men who had become her brothers, at the instructors who had pushed them all to become better than they ever thought possible, at the base where she had discovered what she was truly capable of accomplishing. "Now we go to work," she said simply. "Real operations, real missions, real opportunities to make a difference. Think they're ready for us?" Sarah smiled, thinking about all the people who had doubted whether she belonged here, all the obstacles she had overcome, all the challenges that lay ahead. I don't think that's the right question anymore, she replied. The question is whether the enemy is ready for us. As they walked away from the training compound for the last time, Sarah knew that this wasn't an ending, but a beginning. She had proven that she belonged among the elite, but, more importantly, she had helped change an institution that had been closed to women for generations. The young girls who would grow up seeing women in special operations roles would never have to wonder if they were capable of serving their country at the highest levels. The barriers had been broken not through political pressure or social engineering, but through the same method that had always determined success in special operations: superior performance under extreme pressure. The mission was complete, but the real work was just beginning.